Hi, everybody. I'm glad you're here. I forgot to tweet it out again. Doesn't matter. People watch it. Not a lot of people out there. People. Anyway, welcome to Aggressive Progressives. We got a full panel. Steve-O is not here. Steve-O is out doing things that are more important. I don't know what that could possibly be, but we miss him. So we have special guests sitting in. Well, we have Malcolm Fleshner to my left. Hi, Malcolm. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
The host of Reporting In, which is, sadly got canceled.
Yeah, but thanks for bringing it up in case anybody didn't know.
So people are going to be reporting out and not reporting in. Also with us is one of my all-time favorite comedians, Eddie Pepitone is here, nicknamed the Bitter Buddha. Eddie is described as a modern-day cross between Jackie Gleason, Don Rickles, and Eckhart Tolle.
That's right. I'm Jackie Gleason. I'm Eckhart Tolle. And I'm Don Rickles, hockey puck.
You also host the popular podcast Pep Talks.
Not that popular, but please listen to it.
I've been on that show. And he writes and he appears in the hit web series Puddin', Puddin. And you got a comedy special on Netflix right now. It's called In Ruins.
In Ruins. It was taken down from Netflix, sort of like Malcolm's career.
In fairness, Eddie, I never actually had a career.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Hulu,
Me neither, really.
Hulu did the same thing to me. So I had a special that went out on Hulu, and all of a sudden the link doesn't work, and you can't.
Right.
And I'm like, why would you frickin' do that? Why would you ever stop?
I was told that Netflix takes them down after 4 years, but I don't think that's true. You know, no one wants to tell me the truth, including the major news media. Who's going to tell me the truth? Not my parents. They've been lying to me my whole life. No, they have been. People are upset that Trump doesn't tell the truth or our politicians don't. My parents never told me the truth.
Yeah, I know your parents. They're big liars. Also with us is the miserable liberal, Steph Zamorano. Hi, Steph. How are you?
I was worried you were going to forget about me.
So real quick, I want to just show this. The Clintons, by the way, they don't have enough money. So they're doing a speaking tour. It's supposed to be a show. It'd be one thing if they did it at like coffee shops. Hey, come give me $20. You can sit around and watch me and my wife talk, Bill Clinton. But they're doing it in hockey stadiums. Which, if you do it, so once you do it in a room bigger than, say, like 100 people, for me, I feel a responsibility to actually put on a show, right?
Absolutely.
And what they're doing.
That's why I just do coffee shops.
So they're not doing a show. They're just doing like a crappy podcast where they just sit around and talk to each other with a well, here, go to my computer. This is.
For a lot of money?
An Evening with the Clintons. And of course, the first place they're doing it is at an arena named after a bank.
Oh, yeah.
The Scotia Bank Arena.
Where is that?
So that's in Toronto, eh?
Okay,
And so there was 18,000 seats in that place, or roughly around 18 to 20,000 seats.
Was it full?
Who knew that the Canadians would love him so much?
Was not full.
You see, that's what they deserve, that kind of audience.
They split the place in half and they still couldn't fill it. Do you see this?
I see that.
They pull a curtain.
Margaret, you want to go see the Clintons? No, thanks, Ted. I'm so sick of those people.
So there it is. So see how they made
It's so empty. I love it.
so empty.
I love it.
They sold 3,000 tickets in an 18,000 seat arena.
It's almost like it's a metaphor how empty it is.
Yeah. Well, let me just say this. Nobody would go to see Hillary Clinton speak for free when she was running for president. She couldn't fill a gymnasium. That's not me exaggerating. That's a fact. She couldn't fill a gymnasium. What makes you think she's going to be able to fill a stadium now? Oh, because she has Bill Clinton with her? Yeah, that's what they thought. Man. And the guy interviewing them, by the way, chairman of a bank. These people, they can't help but be the biggest assholes in the history of the world, the Clintons. They literally have a guy who's the chairman of a bank at a stadium named for a bank interviewing them on their speaking tour where they're charging $400 or $500 for a ticket.
But Canadian?
No, that's American. The tickets actually had dropped down to $5.
That's true?
Yeah. The tickets went from like $500 and they dropped them down all the way.
You see a scalper out there, it's like give me 450, 450. All right, give me 350. And then, it just has that thing where it's like cut to like an hour later. Give me a buck.
Yeah.
Give me a $1.50 and a crawler. Oh my God.
You got a
for
loony?
a dozen. For a
How
dozen.
about for a loony?
A loony.
For Canadian Tire money.
A loon? I know. I've been to Canada.
What is up with Hillary? Why can't she let go and just, disappear into that bunker beneath Connecticut or upstate New York, wherever one of their places is?
I think Hillary Clinton is like an old girlfriend who keeps calling you back, saying, you showing up, going, hey, remember my good ideas and how I spoke monotone most of the time?
Remember how I didn't inspire anybody, and on my campaign, our electoral map didn't include Wisconsin and Michigan? Remember that?
Well, but realistically, she was a horrible politician by pretty much any standard. And I mean, she almost lost to Bernie, who was nobody had ever heard of.
Nobody.
Nobody. And they had cleared the field for her. She had everything behind her. She almost lost to Bernie anyway, and then she lost to Donald Trump. So is it really any surprise that she's also a terrible post candidate? A terrible ex candidate.
No surprise to me.
Like, I mean, her instincts were wrong almost across the board before.
Yeah.
That's not going to change just because she loses.
Hey, why not call half the country deplorables as you're trying to get their vote? She literally wasn't trying to get Democratic votes. She was trying to get Republican votes. That was their whole strategy. Anyway, let's.
You don't think she lost because of Russia? I'm kidding, progressive audience. Progressive audience. I'm kidding.
Rachel Maddow,
Don't come at me.
Rachel Maddow watches. She's got a membership now, and she's
Rachel
watching, and she is going to be
Maddow.
so pissed at you. You are never getting invited onto Rachel Maddow's show now, Eddie. Sorry.
So
I don't know if that was your plan, but forget it.
So what we do here at the Aggressive Progressive, I was explaining to Eddie Pepitone before the show started why this show got started, and that Cenk Uygur actually funds this show for us to do because he likes funding a counterpoint of view, which shows that he's a big person. Because I wouldn't do that.
There must be something in it for him.
So if you were running a network, you wouldn't invite like Jen Kirkman to come and do a show on your network?
I think Jen Kirkman is we're old friends, and even though she's blocked me on Twitter now, I understand it. But
Deborah Messing wouldn't get
no,
off
Deborah
the show?
Messing would not.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure it out.
No, Deborah Messing would not.
I don't
she
want
an
to even get in an elevator with Deborah Messing.
Deborah Messing, remember she said she'd rather get in an elevator with Trump than Susan Sarandon.
Oh my!
And I get it because she's in show business, and you don't want to be around people with more talent.
That's right. What was she on, Messi? Just a couple.
She's on that Will and Grace.
Grace.
That's her.
It's a great show.
It is a great show.
Hey, before we move on, I want to acknowledge that today is the 48th anniversary, as we tape, it's the 48th anniversary of the assassination of Fred Hampton in Chicago by the FBI.
We should have did a whole thing about
And
it.
I only saw on Twitter this morning that he was trending, and I was like, wow, Fred Hampton is trending on Twitter. There may be hope for the revolution after all.
Fred Hampton was a real radical.
And then he got replaced by Joe Biden, and I was like, oh, well, forget it then.
You know why they ended up killing Fred Hampton, right? So Fred Hampton was, they say that you needed Malcolm X to make Martin Luther King palatable to white liberals, right? So you had to have Malcolm X out there scaring them so then they would embrace Martin Luther King, right? And so Fred Hampton was this guy who was a Black Panther, and he was a radical, and they used the gun laws to their favor. And the FBI was willing to let him live until he started speaking out to white racists and the Aryans. And as soon as they started, because they found a common thing to go against.
What was their common ground?
So they were both fighting the man. So they felt also left out of the economic benefits in society. These were Southern whites coming to Chicago.
Does this sound familiar to you?
And so as soon as they started listening to him and his message of revolution, that's when the FBI was like, we got to kill this guy.
They burst into his apartment, shot him in his bed while he was sleeping, and I think I don't know if did they shoot his girlfriend who was 9 months pregnant? Possibly both of them, but they definitely shot him and killed him. He was 21, 22 years old.
Yeah.
He was 21, 22, revolutionary.
Desperate threat to the nation, so they had to assassinate him. But anyway, it's nice to know that people still remember, even though it's 48 years later, that he's trending on Twitter. It was at least this morning.
The Dollop, Dave Anthony does a podcast called The Dollop, and they did a whole episode about Fred Hampton, which I heard, which blew me away. Blew me away. So I would recommend, if you know the Dollop podcast, go find the one on Fred Hampton and be blown away as I was.
Dave Anthony's
After
doing
you listen
good
to
work.
after you listen to your podcast.
Yeah.
Dave Anthony.
I just talk about my childhood. But
surprising, right?
no, Dave Anthony's doing great work. And
Yes.
the Hampton Institute is a good thing to follow on Twitter, if you guys know it. Hampton Institute. And go to the Hamptons. It's a beautiful place.
And go to the Hamptons.
I love the Hamptons.
Yeah.
It's just nice.
Lionel Hampton, tremendous
Lionel
vibraphonist.
Hampton?
I mean, yeah.
Bobby Seale, he's still alive, right?
Maybe, I don't know.
Is he?
I think so. Anyway, let's get to some of this, Joe. Let me.
Wouldn't that be refreshing to see on news shows, like if someone said, "Hey, Bobby Seale is here today," or something like that, and one of the guests said, "Is he really?" Like, and that's the level.
Yeah.
Is he? I thought he wasn't alive.
I thought he was dead. He's
Ed
here.
Asner?
Ed
Is
Asner?
here?
Whoa, Abe Vigoda?
That was the one. Everybody was like,
yeah.
"Is he still?"
Still alive. The
No,
thing about Abe
he's
Vigoda
not.
was that he was one of those guys, he looked 50 when he was 30.
Yeah. Wilford Brimley. I mean, he could play old.
I'm telling you. Yeah. So Larry Reed was a lot like that in Chicago, comedian Larry Reed. Okay, so one of the things we do here at the Aggressive Progressives is we like to show you the truth and we give you a counter narrative to the establishment news, and sometimes it's even in the independent news. Well, this is one of those stories. So last week, The Guardian launched this bogus story. So if you notice, the pattern is every couple of weeks or months, they have this huge story. We got Trump. We got him on and then it just everything.
Smoking gun. It's another
Smoking
smoking gun. This is the one that's going to end the Trump presidency.
And then it all just fades away. It all just it was nothing. It was nothing. The dossier, which, oh my God, it was. So they did one of these things. So there's this guy named Luke Harding who wrote a book called Collusion, which is all about Donald Trump's collusion with Russia. And when he was interviewed about his book and asked to show evidence of collusion by Aaron Matei from The Real News, Luke Harding couldn't produce any. And he kept looking like an idiot in that interview to the point where he actually left the interview. And if you know Aaron Matei, the guy couldn't be more low-key and just asking straight questions. He doesn't raise his voice. He's not like me at all. He's very... and so Luke Harding has been writing one BS story after another about collusion in Russia because he's a grifter. And so we've shown you that. Aaron Matei has outed him. But when you lie on the behalf of the establishment, there is never a price to pay. Luke Harding is pushing the most wild conspiracy theories, and no one's ever going to call him a conspiracy theorist, even though that's what he is. And he's a propagandist. And so he wrote an article that made its way into the Guardian last week. And here's the article. The article is headlined, Manafort held secret talks with Assange in Ecuadorian embassy. Exclusive. Trump ally met WikiLeaks founder months before emails hacked by Russia were published. So they say, just even in that sub-headline, it says emails hacked by Russia. There's no evidence of that. They just now print it as fact. They have no evidence that that happened. None. And now it's just fact. That's how propaganda works. You just say it over and over and over, and people it just starts to seep in. So I read this. So this was reported ubiquitously. This article was re-reported in the establishment press and in independent press also, and uncritically reported. And it just goes to show you how establishment propaganda works. And the people who re-reported this story uncritically, I have to think they didn't even read the goddamn article. Because when I read it, and I'm, again, C student, dumb, jagoff nightclub comedian, I saw right through this article. So there's lots of people who went to much better colleges who are much smarter than me who read this same article and either turned off their critical thinking skills or didn't care. So I'm going to just take you through this article and show you how ridiculous it is. So this article claims that Paul Manafort met 3 times at the Ecuadorian embassy with Julian Assange. Well, let's go through the article and I'll show you how garbage it is. Okay, so Donald Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, held secret talks with Julian Assange inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London and visited around the time he joined Trump's campaign. The Guardian has been told. By who? We'll never know. We'll never know. Sources have said. Sources? What sources? We'll never know. Sources have said Manafort went to see Assange in 2013, 2015, and in the spring of 2016, during the period when he was made a key figure in the Trump's push for the White House. Manafort's first visit to the embassy took place a year after Assange sought asylum inside. 2 sources said, so now, why don't you just say 40 sources? Why not say 50 sources?
Why not say sauces?
Why not say
like a gravy, a brown gravy.
Why not say sauce? 2 sauces said. And I keep it a pack of each of my purse.
It's got the same credibility.
Yes.
I'm telling you,
So
I can't think of a sauce, or I would say it.
I mean, neither. Tabasco.
Hollandaise.
Hollandaise, nice. That's a nice sauce.
It's a good sauce.
And you just see a dish of Hollandaise being interviewed by Anderson Cooper.
Yeah.
Well, did you or did you not?
See Manafort or didn't you? So going back to this article, a separate internal document written by Ecuador's Senate intelligence agency and seen by The Guardian lists Paul Manafort. So can I just tell you the irony of this? So they're quoting a document by the intelligence agency of Ecuador, which we've also shown you has been compromised by the Goldman Sachs and the banks, and they've taken a payoff and all that stuff. So now they've turned on Julian Assange, right? And so now they're in cahoots with the Western intelligence community, the CIA, the MI6, in getting rid of Julian Assange. So they're in cahoots now. So what's the irony here is that they're now quoting, this Guardian article is quoting an internal document from their intelligence agency in Ecuador about Paul Manafort, and the document misspells Paul Manafort's name. How frickin' reliable is this document that misspells his name at beginning? So this is what they're quoting. So go back to
it's not like it's like a resume or something important. This is just a document.
So let's go back to this. A separate internal document written by Ecuador's Senate intelligence agency and seen by The Guardian's lists Paul Manafort as one of several well-known guests. It also mentions Russians. That's amazing.
I love that.
It just says it mentions Russians. It doesn't say it mentions. It mentions.
It was probably Russian dressing.
There you go. That's the sauce that we're talking about.
Russian dressing.
Russian.
So it doesn't say it mentions Russians were also present, or it just says it mentions Russians. It could have said no Russians were involved in this, but it mentioned Russians. So what The Guardian is hoping is, I guess, is that when you read this, you'll just go, I'll just ignore that. That means absolutely nothing. That's what that means.
By the way, an idiot like me thinks The Guardian is some kind of reputable paper because it's in Britain. No, I'm serious. I'm like, The Guardian.
Yeah.
These people went to school.
Yeah. You know
British accents.
British accents.
Very credible.
Yeah, and so you know who else? Rupert Murdoch also owns a lot of newspapers in Britain.
That's true.
So this, I love that. So it also mentions Russians, and that's it. It doesn't say what it says about Russians or what Russians are involved. It just says it also mentions Russians. Oh, so what a horrible job of propaganda. And it's like, throw in Russian. Oh, yeah, it also said Russians. What? I don't know. Don't worry. Just say Russians. Just say it. Mm-hmm. And just imagine people who re-reported the story uncritically. How the F can you read the story and not be drunk or asleep and still re-report this uncritically? This is crazy.
And by the way, this gives Trump credibility.
Oh, no doubt.
Because when he says fake
news, now it lands.
Now it lands.
Yes. Well, they've been doing this over and over. This whole Russiagate thing is fake news, and that's why it lands when Trump says it.
That's right.
So, according to the sources, Manafort returned to the embassy in 2015. He paid another visit in the spring of 2016, turning up alone. Around the time Trump named him as his convention manager, the visit is tentatively dated to March. Let me just show you this. Manafort's 2016 visit to Assange lasted about 40 minutes, one source said, adding that the American was casually dressed when he exited the embassy, wearing sandy-colored chinos, a cardigan, and a light-colored shirt.
Well, that seals it.
That seals it.
Well, that seals it.
Doesn't it?
If you can say how someone was dressed, then it's like, Margaret, they have how he was dressed. It's got to be true. A cardigan? You can't make that up. What is he, a novelist?
See, you're joking, but it does add an air of authenticity.
It does.
To
So
it,
you
specificity.
give specificity and a detail. It makes it seem, well, it must be true. They said he's wearing a cardigan and chinos. Except
It was Mr. Rogers.
Except that was Mr. Rogers. No, except if you know anything about the Ecuadorian embassy, if you know anything about the UK is the most surveilled city in the history of the world, right? And especially the Ecuadorian embassy, which not only the CIA has a camera pointed at, but the MI6 and probably dozens of cameras pointed at them. And so does every goddamn news agency. And so do other countries have cameras. So there's got to be about, I don't know,
Right. So
5,000 cameras. There's more cameras pointed at the Ecuadorian embassy than are inside of a camera shop. Okay, go ahead, Eddie. What did you say?
No, right. I mean, I know your point. Where's the footage of Manafort?
There's not one.
Manafort, not Fort. This guy Manafort,
Yeah.
whoever he is.
I don't know.
Chino enthusiast.
You can't lie about chinos. You
No,
really
that's
can't.
right.
You know, that detail kind of seals the deal for me.
So they-
like this whole
Even his
article,
parents wouldn't lie about chinos.
like
No,
this
they
whole
would.
article, like how do you not name any source?
Not one source.
So now we're indoctrinated to read these articles, and just because they say source, it's reliable.
And the reason why people will take BS stories like this and ingest them is because it aligns, it's called confirmation bias. You think Trump is working with the Russians and Assad is all, and they're all together and they're all in cahoots. And so anything you read that confirms your bias, you go along with.
By the
Because
way-
Trump, let me just say
Yes,
this,
sorry.
because Trump, and we've made this point a million times, he excites the lizard brain of a lot of people, and it short circuits their critical thinking skills. So they have a totally different standard when it comes to reporting on this story on Assange and Russia and Trump as they do for every other story. And so that's the opposite of being a progressive, FYI. Eddie?
Oh, I was just going to say, is this whole Russia, thing, because the Washington establishment, right? It cannot accept the fact, the Democrats,
Yes.
cannot accept the fact that they've lost.
Right. So
They still can't accept the fact that it's their policies
and they cheated.
their sellout.
And they committed the biggest election fraud in the history of the country in the 2016 primary, which no one talks about. No one. And what do they talk about? This made-up hoax of hacking by the Russians and Assange and all this blah, 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 blah. And so this serves many purposes. It serves a lot of purposes for the CIA. It serves purposes for the military-industrial complex and for the Democratic Party and the DNC. And of course, for newspapers and for news outlets, they get, Rachel Maddow's got the highest rated news show in the cable right now. And all she does is talk about a conspiracy theory that she has no evidence of. But no one will ever call her a conspiracy theorist because she's lying on the behalf of the establishment. So just like Luke Harding in The Guardian here, just like The Guardian is lying, they'll never be called conspiracy theorists, even though that's what they are of the highest order, because they're doing it at the behest of the establishment, which is why the CIA and the establishment don't say what Trump did is a conspiracy. They call it collusion because they've already made the term conspiracy toxic. So now they're saying it's collusion because they don't want to be called conspiracy theorists. They say it's collusion. Do you see the trickery in the words?
Stop, Jimmy. Just stop it.
So I've noticed. So,
Jesus, this show makes me nervous. No, but it's just amazing that you're a voice of reason in this insanity.
there's a handful of people who are reasonable about this topic, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it. You see how the Red Scare happened the first time? Everybody goes along with it. So let me just finish this article, right? So they have him casually dressed when he exited the embassy wearing a cardigan and chinos, but not one goddamn picture of it, even though it's the most surveilled place in the history of the world.
They also don't mention his shoes.
They don't mention his shoes.
So
Or
there's
the
a big
color of
hole.
his eyes.
There's a gap. There's a hole there.
I know he wears penny loafers.
Yeah, why wouldn't they mention it?
Why don't you mention a nice? Is he wearing boat? What do they call boat topsiders?
shoes?
Topsiders
You wear them in the Hamptons.
in the Hamptons. Sure. Back to my thing, please. Visitors normally register with embassy security guards and show their passports. Sources in Ecuador, however, say Manafort was not logged in. What are the chances? What are the chances they forgot to log in? The most important guy that would make the whole collusion thing happen. Oh my God, what a bad break of luck for the intelligence community and the bullshitters over at The Guardian. What a bad, they didn't log him in.
Well, just
And
the
there's no-
3 times. Only the 3 times, Jimmy.
Just the 3 times.
By the way, Luke Harding left an interview where he was being questioned.
So he was being on Skype. He was being by the Real News. He was being interviewed,
On
and he
Skype?
just he just left his. He goes, okay, that's it. He just unplugged.
I'm driving through a canyon.
Yeah.
But you're on Skype, you idiot.
He just unplugged and left it.
Canyon.
So not only was
head of cattle.
not only was he not logged in. They just forgot to log in the most important, most consequential guy ever to visit Julian Assange. They forgot to log him in. And no pictures, not a single picture of the most surveilled building in the history of all mankind. Not one picture of him coming in and out 3 freaking times. Also, Manafort's passport isn't stamped. So everybody's lying. So now the immigration people are lying because they didn't stamp his passport. The guards at the embassy didn't log him in 3 times, and nobody's got pictures, but it definitely happened. And this is the story that was repeated ubiquitously in the establishment media, and even in independent media repeated the story uncritically. And also people found in this story a time to also smear Julian Assange. What has Julian Assange ever done that had to be retracted? Nothing. He's never had to retract anything, and he's an award-winning journalist. Okay, WikiLeaks wins awards for their journalism. They've never had to retract anything. And if you really think you care about, if you're going to talk about Jim Acosta for a minute, you should talk about Julian Assange for 5 hours. And because that's the real threat to freedom of speech. Jim Acosta is not exposing the powerful. Jim Acosta is bread and circus. Jim Acosta is a self-promoter, a self-aggrandizer, and he's part of CNN, which just fired a guy for telling the truth about Israel. So F you and your allegiance to Jim Acosta if you don't talk about Julian Assange. It reveals you to be a fake progressive.
Right on.
And here's what Caitlin Johnson said about this story. She said this in Consortium News. She says, if it wasn't obvious to you last week that there is an unelected power establishment which needs above all else to control the public narrative about what's going on in the world, it should certainly be obvious to you this week. The Guardian hit piece was so spectacularly desperate in its overreaching to advance a narrative which has been used to manufacture support for longtime CIA MI6 agendas, like what? Like arresting Julian Assange, stopping WikiLeaks, censoring the internet, and subverting Russia, that it completely exposed itself as an establishment psyop firm that it is. Former Guardian employee Jonathan Cook explains that from what he learned while working at the outlet, the most likely explanation is that the editors permitted the article to be published because its anonymous sources came from within an intelligence or defense agency. So imagine what they're doing is they're literally, what we accuse them of doing is being stenographers to power, is what they're doing. So they didn't apply any journalistic standards to this story because their sources were inside the intelligence community and the defense industry. And so they just repeated it like stenographers. So exactly what we said they do. One more thing. So here's more from Jonathan Cook. He said, I worked for The Guardian for a number of years and know well the layers of checks that any highly sensitive story has to go through before publication. In that lengthy process, a variety of commissioning editors, lawyers, backbench editors, and the editor herself, Kath Veneer, would normally insist on cuts to anything that could not be rigorously defended and corroborated. And yet, this piece seems to have been casually waved through, given a green light, even though its profound shortcomings were evident to a range of well-placed analysts and journalists from the outset. That, at the very least, hints that The Guardian thought they had insurance on this story. And the only people who could have promised that kind of insurance are the security and intelligence services, presumably of Britain, the United States, and or Ecuador. So as Glenn Greenwald says, in sum, The Guardian published an article today that it knew would explode into all sorts of viral benefits for the paper and its reporters, even though there are gaping holes and highly sketchy aspects to the story. That's a media pattern we've seen over and over in this story. So what's even funny, after all this pushback from people like me, Glenn Greenwald, and people who are actually critical of propaganda instead of repeaters of propaganda, since then, the Guardian has gone back to change their headline. So their headline used to say this. This was their headline before. Manafort held secret talks with Assange in Ecuadorian embassy. And now it says this. Manafort's secret talks with Assange in Ecuadorian embassy. Sources say. Oh. They've added sources say. So how much time do we have? How much time? 4 minutes. Oh, we got some time left. So
Sources say.
let me just say, go back to my computer for a second. Remember this. This is WikiLeaks. Remember this day when the Guardian permitted a serial fabricator, Luke Harding, to totally destroy the paper's reputation. WikiLeaks is willing to bet that the Guardian $1 million and its editor's head that Manafort never met Assange.
Wow.
So this, again, let me throw it to my panel. You know how I feel about this. You know what's crazy to me is there's a second part to this story. The second part to this story is then Politico then ran an article backing up this article in a weird way. So they had, I'll show you. Let me just fast. Well, let me go to Guardian. The source they point to was The Guardian, a not sourced article. It's a real life game of propaganda telephone, and that's what this is.
Right.
And those stories also remain in, online forever and ever. Even if the Guardian were to go back and retract this,
yes,
all those stories that refer to it
stay forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
So that remains.
So then Politico, get this. So this is so then you don't think the intelligence agency has infiltrated news organizations ubiquitously? Just like go look up a video, go to YouTube and look up the Church Committee hearings. Because that was all about them exposing the CIA infiltrating all our news organizations. You don't think they're doing that again? Where do you think this article just came from? It came right from the CIA and the MI6 and the Ecuadorian intelligence people who were all working together. And here's another article came right from the CIA, and it's in Politico. So if you go to my computer, it says, and this is under Law and Order, it said, did someone plant a story tying Paul Manafort to Julian Assange? And that's by Alex Finley.
So, but hang on, Jimmy. So as you see that headline, you're thinking, oh, Politico's going to expose it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
They didn't even word plant.
There's some truth. They're gonna expose the truth. It's weird. Politico, wow, doing some real journalism, right?
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 Weird.
Right?
Weird. But the story is written by a guy, if you look, it says Alex Finley. Now, Alex Finley is a fake person.
No.
Not a real person, Alex Finley.
Cardigan wearer?
Maybe he's wearing chinos and topsiders right now. So they do a story. Did someone plant a story tying Paul Manafort? And so what this story is all about is defending Luke Harding, because Luke Harding is a tool of the CIA, MI6, and the intelligence communities, and he's a stenographer to power, and he's been printing every BS story possible about this. And so now they rush to do a story because now they see how he's being discredited, which will discredit all of the stuff he's done. So now they got to go save him. So they get a CIA guy under a fake name to then plant a BS story, and Politico runs it.
Unbelievable. Hey,
no journalistic standards, no editing, no nothing. Eddie?
Well, one thing I don't understand is the CIA planning. This would be an anti-Trump story. Now, isn't the CIA?
But Trump wants to get Assange, which makes this so even crazier.
Right.
So let me just finish this, and because we're almost up against the break. And so here is how the fake CIA guy under a fake name in Politico.
They admit this.
They admit that he's a fake guy.
They do.
Nobody had to expose this. They admitted that they didn't want to run this with anybody's name.
Yeah.
His name attached to it because
why
he's
don't
such
they
a
put
secret.
anonymous instead of Alex Finley then? Because the casual read will be like, oh, this is Alex Finley,
yeah.
the great Alex Finley.
So we're up against the break, and before we go to the break, I just want to tell you, I'm gonna give you spoiler alert about this article. Is this fake CIA guy in Politico says Luke Harding got tricked by Russia. We'll be right back.
It all comes around.
We'll be right back. You can't make this stuff up.
This show makes me